Hey everyone, it's Kristan. Welcome to this new episode of Exclusively Pro-Life Podcast. I am live with my good friend Kira Davis. She is the editor at large for Red State, and you may have heard her podcast. Tina Whittington, our VP at Students for Life, is the biggest fan of the Kira Davis podcast. It's called Just Listen to Yourself. It's fantastic. I was actually listening to some episodes this morning as I was preparing for this podcast. I was like, damn, that was good.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so excited. She's kicking my butt in the podcast game. She has millions of downloads. I don't think we're even close to that. You live here in Southern California with your husband. Yep. You have 2 children, right?
Yes.
One's in college.
One's in college in Chicago, and one is here.
All right, one is here. So, and you're also a dog person, it says in your bio.
I'm a dog person. As a matter of fact, right before I got here today, the rescue that I work with texted me to ask could I take on a foster.
Aww.
So, when I get home, I might have a husky.
Oh, that's so awesome. We have 2 puppies, and I just bought a little Christmas stocking for the 3rd puppy that I don't have yet, but I'm hoping is conceived in the next couple of months.
Wow. Well, how many
I was like,
kids
is this
do
weird?
you have?
4.
And 2 puppies going on 3?
Yeah, so we have 2 puppies, and they're both a year old, and then we have to add to the pack because we have white and black, and so I need red. So we
okay. I didn't know there was like a system. Okay, I get it. It makes sense.
So I got a Christmas stocking for the puppy that hasn't been conceived yet, but I'm a dog person too.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad. So we have a lot we can talk about. Your show, your podcast kind of covers kind of a pretty wide range of topics that are ongoing. And I mean, you just did a whole show, like a short one about the Loudoun County parents and parental rights. And okay, so
I cover the gamut. My idea is to help people think.
Yeah.
So I'm not, it comes from a conservative perspective, obviously, because I'm a conservative and that's my job in politics. But I try to formulate the show so that you could share it with anybody. I would want you to be able to share it with your mom who voted for Biden or your dad who voted for Trump, or, I try to think about it in terms of, this is a podcast where I want us to break down talking points. We have so many talking points. Social media is about sound bites and 280 characters. And everybody has clever talking points, but a lot of people never think about what they mean. They say it out loud, and then they're like, oh, like one talking point that gets under my skin and I think about a lot is when pro-abortion advocates say that abortion is a race issue, and that if, to help communities of color, we have to leave open reproductive rights. That sounds good in a soundbite, right? Communities of color. Who hates communities of color?
Apparently I
do. But when you dig under it, what you're really telling me is the world will be better with fewer Black babies in it.
That's right.
That's a talking point. It sounds clever on the top, but underneath it's insidious. So I don't think
that's awesome.
And I think that's what makes us tense too, is we're not examining what we believe. So we don't feel content in what we believe. And then we feel like we've got to bludgeon people with it because we just don't have good arguments.
Yeah, you had one show I particularly loved was Are Republicans Racist?
Yes.
And you kind of broke down like, okay, so when you say this and then you hear the right say this isn't what they're saying. This is the perspective of conservatives, that you should have an ID because your right to vote is very precious, and we don't want anyone to steal your vote, which is why we need to be able to prove who you are when you go vote. It's not because Republicans think that brown, black, or whoever people should have the right to vote.
Right.
Yeah.
Digging into those tropes. So it's like I did that for my liberal listeners because I do have quite a few. And I wanted to give them a reason to not feel scared about Republicans, because I feel like there's so much fear being thrown around and fear sells. So I don't want to convert anybody. That's up to you. It's not my job to decide how you're going to vote, but I want you to give a reason to not hate your neighbor.
Okay. Well, speaking of fear, let's talk about conservatives.
Yeah.
And the general.
They're scary.
And
It's very
yes, we're very scary people apparently. But conservatives and the general pro-life movement, because I sometimes think that political conservatives, just broad conservatives, are kind of scared of the pro-lifers. That it's kind of like, oh, here come the pro-lifers trying to rope me into doing this. Or I was at political function with President Trump, which, by the way, I did delete him on Twitter, but it was really refreshing to hear his speech. Just say I left in the middle of it because I had another meeting.
I saw him at CPAC. But I had the same experience. I was like, oh, you know what? It's nice hearing from him.
I know. I was
like,
I kind of miss this guy. I miss hearing these comments.
I thought the same thing.
There were a couple, he was talking about the election being so. I was like, okay, just stop. But the rest of it was pretty fun. But I was at this event and I was all dressed up, and like I think I posted an image on my it was Instagram. People were like, holy cow, Kristan can dress up.
You clean up good.
Yeah, it was a process, and it was very painful, and my back still hurts from those spanks that night. Don't just say. But I went because I thought this was a great opportunity for Students for Life to kind of get our name in front of, the broader conservative movement, because I worked in conservative politics, but then I really was sort of cautious when we launched Students for Life to not be seen as overly conservative. Yes. Now the cat's out of the bag. I mean, apparently everyone knows I'm a conservative, and so I'm kind of embracing it more of like, well, okay, if I'm going to be known as a conservative, or all these students are going to protest me for saying that there's only two genders and sexes, let's use it to our advantage, and let's try to get some conservatives, people who may have voted for Trump, gone out door knocked, first time in politics, got excited, but don't really know about the pro-life movement. They've never gone and prayed in front of a Planned Parenthood. They've never joined the pro-life movement for the annual pro-life march or something like that. But it was an illuminating night of conversations. I would, everybody would kind of ask, what do you do? I tell them. They get excited when I mention, like, oh, we were just in Virginia. We were the only pro-life organization door knocking in Virginia. So they got all amped up. And then, they kind of pull me aside later and say, well, what about rape? Or I had a couple women say, I really like what you do. I love that you're going head to head with those liberals on campus. And I know Planned Parenthood's supposed to be bad, but like, doesn't Planned Parenthood do some really good things though too? And it was interesting because I was like, whoa. We need to have a lot of like elementary conversations. Yeah. So what's up with that?
I can't. I feel as surprised as you do.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just in a bubble because I just feel so strongly about the sanctity of life. And I always assume other conservatives do. And so sometimes it just doesn't come up. I think I'm assuming that everyone's thinking the way I do, but I have met specifically younger conservatives these days in the political movement who are that is their take on it, right? I value life. I don't believe in abortion, but and it's always rape. I mean, obviously that is a big hump for a lot of people to get over because you're thinking about the mom but not the child. And obviously you want to have compassion for the mom. That's a normal human response of a decent person. So I get that, but I'm always shocked at how many Christians, self-proclaimed Christians, make that argument to me, because at the end of the day I'm like, yes, it's a terrible occurrence, but then you can't punish two people for that. The mom's been punished, but I think we both agree that when you end a life, whether it's created in rape or in love, when you decide to terminate a pregnancy, to use those terms, you're ending a future, right? We can all agree that that's a future that will no longer exist.
That's right.
And that means if that's a future, then that means that's a human. And then if that's a human, then that means you have effectively terminated a human life. And so that's what we have to deal with. And I find it really odd that Christians, particularly evangelical Christians these days, don't seem to grasp that or want to. And maybe it is because I think particularly, and I'm speaking as an evangelical Christian.
And these were all, I believe, all evangelicals.
Really? Yeah. I see this a little bit within the evangelical church, and that's a broad term, but I wonder if a lot of it is just people, no one likes to be disliked, and the political discourse surrounding issues like abortion these days is so heated and so cruel and so judgmental. It's not like back in my parents' days where you could have an opinion on it, but that opinion didn't dictate your whole life or your whole character. You know, people felt certain ways and you talked about it around the kitchen table, but no one thought, well, you must be evil. But now it's like we're in this black and white. It's just you are here or you are there, and there is no in between. And I just think there's a lot of people out there who are cowardly. They feel more attached to being liked than to being holy. Yeah, I think that's a mic drop. You can just take that microphone and just shove it on the table right now. Goodbye. I think that, I mean, I remember when I worked at the RNC, and this was in 2004, 2005-ish. And I remember at that time, it was kind of like an anomaly to be pro-life and be working in Republican politics. They knew that the base was pro-life. But like if you were like a political operative, you weren't really pro-life. You know, the base might be pro-life, but you weren't. And I remember I remember a lot of heated discussions I got into with my boss, my superiors, my colleagues. And then I do think, to his credit, love him or hate him, President Trump, when he came in and brought in this whole new group of political operatives, even though he didn't have a pro-life past, I guess you could say, the operatives that he brought in who worked throughout the RNC, who worked in the administration, they were very pro-life. And so we've come a long way in terms of, generally now, I think you could walk into the RNC's offices in DC and you could say, raise your hand if you're against abortion, and I bet 90% of the staff would probably say, yeah, that's me, I'm against abortion. But I do think this rape question that folks have of how to deal with a woman who survived sexual assault, who has become pregnant, I think that's one of the things we really have to get over, and we have to talk about and kind of really hammer home and ask those questions like you just said. Like, is it a future that's been ended? And what kind of future? A human future. And that's a human being. And because I feel like there is still a disconnect. I mean, I was a little taken back by how many people were still, they had gotten the memo that Planned Parenthood was bad. Yeah. That's kind of crazy. But then, but they still do good things. They, like what? Everybody says that, but I'm like what? What does I honestly? I almost was snarky in my reply. My only experiences with Planned Parenthood have been, and I have never walked into a Planned Parenthood myself to avail myself of any of their services. My only experiences have been when I've lived in the inner city. They're everywhere. Right now I live in the posh suburbs of Orange County, which is where we're broadcasting from right now, and I couldn't tell you where my local Planned Parenthood is, but I could walk to 3 when I lived in Gary, Indiana, and that was a 86% Black population, and most of the people living under the poverty level. So I know, and I do know that my daughter's school tells me if she wants birth control, she can go to Planned Parenthood, or she can simply make a request and Planned Parenthood will show up at the school with pills for her, and they can have that, because in the state of California you don't have to notify your parents if you want to engage in that sort of advising with Planned Parenthood. So that's what I know of Planned Parenthood. I know Planned Parenthood likes to tell us that they provide mammograms. They don't. Or that they provide birth control. But those are things you can get anywhere. If people knew the amount of money that goes into Planned Parenthood, where is it going? How much does birth control cost? It doesn't cost that much. No, it does not. It's not for as much funding as they still get to this day. So the idea that Planned Parenthood has done what the pro-life movement needs to do, which is they've branded themselves as these champions, and they've managed to hold that spot. And now it's like Susan B. Komen, right? Like, now you don't have to provide any proof. You're just associated with good. You don't, like, Students for Life. That's what, that's what Students for Life needs to be like. Just the name comes up, doesn't matter what y'all have done, just associated with awesome people, and we never have to prove ourselves, and we never have to do anything good. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, that'd be great. But it's marketing, it's branding, right? Yeah. They've done such a good job with it that now we're all playing catch up. Even people we think are allies, we're all playing catch up to that perception. Yeah, no, I tried so hard not to be snarky because I was in the formal dress, but I was just like, I guess the Nazis built some good roads in Germany. I heard too.
yes, evil people, I guess, have also done good things.
Oh, sure.
Like, not everything a person does, if they're evil, maybe has always been evil. I don't know.
Slavery built a lot of stuff in this country.
That's true. I mean, like our White House.
Yeah, look at the White House.
Like,
slavery built a lot of institutions in this country that we still, we get a lot of good out of them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anybody would say slavery was like a noble institution.
Exactly right.
Yes.
Except if you're a pro-life speaker on a college campus.
Then you're obviously
I'm like every IST word that you can ever think of.
Yeah.
There were like new terms.
We're all Hitler now.
Yes, we are. That's
just, if you're not on the far progressive left.
Yeah.
That's it.
I was speaking at Wellesley 3 weeks ago, and I was so excited because it was like my biggest protest to me ever. So it was so awesome. There was like 500 students that protested against me. I was really excited. I get excited by that stuff.
Yeah, I've never been protested that much.
I know. See, I know. See, but you have millions of podcasts.
I
know. So you're still kicking my ass. But it was interesting because they had this like 30-page document of like things that I apparently tweeted. I didn't tweet them. My staff tweeted.
Sure.
Things I've said on TV. Some of them I've been very blunt. And it was like all of these words. Like I had to Google these words, these descriptors that they were calling me because I didn't even know like some of these words existed. That all these students signed, but that's because I was known as a conservative, because it was known that I've spoken out against hormonal birth control. Mm-hmm. I found out that I'm an ableist, that I hate people with disabilities, which that was a new one for me.
Yeah.
I was like, I think my children with disabilities would be really, upset.
They don't count.
That's right. They don't count. That's right. It's like black conservatives. They don't count.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. There's no such thing. It's just a blimp. It's just a blimp. But yeah, it was like, it was very interesting. And so I think that, in terms of getting general conservatives, we've gotten them. The movement, I think, has come pretty
home.
Far. Yeah. I mean, from the days of like Phyllis Schlafly fighting at the RNC convention, so they wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if you ever read one of Phyllis's last books. I wrote the afterword too. I was really excited by it. But it was about how the Republican Party became pro-life, and it was kind of the those first couple of conventions that she attended, and they created this RNC for Life organization to get pro-life into the Republican platform, and mm-hmm. the fights that she had mm-hmm. With people like Bill Kristol and things like that, trying to keep it in the platform. And so I think Phyllis's legacy continues on today, where the party is largely pro-life, but there's still more work I think we've got to do with the broader conservative movement. I mean, even today, like I'll go to like conservative student organizations. I'm like, oh, let's partner. Mm-hmm. And I get we like what you do, but that's the issue we don't talk about. Yeah. I'm like, but your founder is on TV and tweeting about this issue. Yeah. My cameraman's laughing because he was at one of our recent conversations that he watched it happen, and I was like, well, but they're like, oh yeah, but we as an organization will not talk about that issue. Yeah. And so it's still like largely like a taboo.
It's the third rail. Yeah. There are so many people who are like, because it's so polarizing that I actually think this isn't, maybe both sides have a lot of culpability here. Part of the problem is this: if you're talking to anybody who identifies as left of center or mm-hmm. left wing, they're going to shut you down. Sometimes if you want to talk to them about parental rights or taxes or whatever, as the abortion issue will shut them down. Then you get no more words mm-hmm. in with them. Then you have no more credibility. So some people, there is a strategy. We used to do this in the school choice movement. I'm a big school choice advocate, and back in the early days, one of the things that,
by the way, you're a big racist.
I heard. That's what I heard. But one of the things that we would always be told early on is, don't address teachers unions. Don't talk about the scourge of teachers unions, because we have to get Democrats to partner with us. There are a lot of Democrats in the school choice movement, but they're also pro-union people. We don't want to turn them off with union busting language. We want to embrace as many people as will come. So we always had to like keep that hush. And you know what? It didn't really help. In the end, it didn't really help, because teachers unions have been
They hated you anyway.
Jerking us around for the last 2 years with our kids. Turns out they hated us anyway. Yep. It turns out that it didn't matter what you said about the teachers' unions. They were going to come against you and throw everything against you. And so this past 2 years, as I've been watching my kids languish and figure out what we're going to do for their future, I was just like, well, you know what? Gloves are off. You know, you guys have done nothing for us. Why am I tiptoeing around hoping that people will ignore this part of reality so we can talk about the other part? If you don't want to talk about reality, that's on you. That is not my problem. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe I understand why some conservative organizations would not want to trip into that third rail, but I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by shying away from that. It's cowardly. We're trying to be the bigger people and we're dealing with children. So
once again, mic drop, just take that. I mean, I had just had this, so I was at St. Mary's the other week, college, and it's a Catholic school. It's right across the street from Notre Dame and whatever. It's all girls school. Yes. And I made, during the course of my speech, I might have had a Mountain Dew before I started talking. And so I made some flippant remarks about well, there's two genders, or I said something. I was talking about the conversation I had at Wellesley. Oh my goodness. I was like, well, there's only women there. Well, except for some women who have penises or something like that. So I made a couple of funny little quips because I was caffeinated. And so this professor at the end, who's clearly pro-choice, gets up and she's like, and of course, everybody agrees with about half of my speech on college campuses, even though they hate me. They agree with half of my speech because I talk about pregnant and parenting rights and how do we support pregnant and parenting students. So even if you came into the room and hated the first half of my speech, you should end the speech liking me. I actually should flip it around and make them like me first if I was smart. But anyway, she clearly was not with me on abortion. A professor at Catholic college. It makes sense, I guess. But she, said the thing, well, wouldn't you make, more allies if you wouldn't make these comments that hurt transgender people, or she said anti-trans, she used the words. And I said, no, I believe in telling people the truth. And I have friends who are transgender. And I certainly believe that we should show every human being respect that they deserve because they're a human being. But I do think we should tell people the truth. And that, this is actually a very dangerous movement. And it was interesting because I started having a conversation with the students after, she huffed out after that. And, the point I talked to students, I said, did you understand what I was saying? And they loved it because I guess she had been giving them problems. But
it sounds like it.
Yeah, she was well known to the Students for Life group on campus.
The second someone comes up to you and says, you could be a better ally, I'm like, red flag.
Well, and that is it. What you were saying about the school choice movement. I was like, that was the exact conversation I had with the students is, look, they're going to hate you anyway. And you can use all the diversity, inclusive language that you want. Yeah. But the fact that I have Republican next to my name, that I worked to the Republican National Committee, that I said that I'm a Christian and a Christ follower, it doesn't matter. They're still going to hate me. And so you can go in circles all day long trying to do everything. And we've had this happen in this pro-life movement before where pro-life groups are like, we're going to make people on campus like us. Yeah. And so we're going to take on every issue instead of just talking about how abortion is a violent wrong. We're going to talk about poverty. We're going to talk, they talk about everything. Yeah. Death penalty, all of these issues. And I'm like, immigration, especially in Texas, this has come up. And I'm like, well, it's important to talk about those issues, but do you think maybe you're limiting, you kind of limit people from joining your group because if you have 25 issues that you need people to agree with, then
that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Yes. Yeah. And especially if you're a pro-life group that says you're against the death penalty, well, then a lot of Protestants aren't even going to they're not even going to join your group. And you won't even, but it's interesting because I'm like, they're still going to hate you. It doesn't matter how many liberal leaning activities you do, or, the fact that you say you're pro LGBT. And then we had Students for Life group. I forget what school. They had they were like, we'll have a booth at the LGBTQ health fair. And it was just, they just educate students about the dangers of Planned Parenthood. And they didn't really take a stance on anything LGBT. Yeah. But they got kicked out of the fair.
That's hilarious.
Because they were pro-life.
They went.
Just I mean, I loved the gumption to like go, but it was interesting because I'm like, here you are trying to be like super like inclusive and cool,
and it's still not enough.
They still hate you.
It will
because you're against abortion.
It will never be enough. I always tell. I get a lot of letters from listeners to my podcast that ask, mostly from white listeners, who say, Kira, what do I do when someone accuses me of being racist? You know, it hurts me. I'm not racist. Like, for everybody has different reasons for saying it. I wasn't raised that way, or my uncle's black, or you know.
But if you say you're not racist, you're racist to them.
I mean, you can't. This is the
like
point I'm making. You can't win, and I always tell people, and the late great Rush Limbaugh used to say this too. Like, they're gonna hate you. It's not you that's the problem. You are not the problem. It is what you stand for that is the problem. You will never be good enough. This is why people like us lean on faith to find our identity, right? We don't find it in the approval of others. We don't find it in the political opinions of others. We don't find it in how many allies we can gather around us. Our identity is already secure. And so that's really cool to say on a Sunday sermon, and everybody can leave feeling really great hearing the pastor say, our identity is in Jesus. But when you come face to face with the true ugliness of people judging you without knowing you, judging your whole life, and placing the burdens of all evil throughout all of history on your shoulders, just because you uttered one phrase or picked up one cause, that's when it gets real. It's like, I think we've all become way too comfortable in our freedom, and we forgot that freedom is an uncomfortable and participatory process. It is not static. It must always be practiced. It must always be engaged in. That means you've always got to be pushing the boundaries for how far you can go with your language, with your speech, with your right to expression. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be comfortable. When we're comfortable, that's when we find ourselves in this mess where now half the people in America can't even speak out loud. And we got to be okay with being uncomfortable. We got to be okay with being hated. Not to say that it's not hurtful, especially when it's your family, it's your friends, it's your dad, your mom. Like, I've been there all up and down the spectrum. It is hurtful, but at the same time, you can't mute the truth because you're afraid of what other people are going to think about you. We're not called to do that. And even if you're not a person of faith, if you're an intelligent person, you still understand that there's not enough sustenance in the approval of others to keep you going through the rest of your life. You've got to find it somewhere else. So I always tell conservatives who are afraid of being called racist, if someone calls you a racist, so are you? No? Then move on. You're not going to make your case to this person. They've already decided everything about you.
I loved everything you just said. Amen, sister. I mean, we need to send it out to like every Students for Life leader, because you get that all the time, especially now. The school year is in full swing. Everyone's back on campus, and it's, you know, saying extremely polarized. And the level of cyberbullying, especially with our high school Students for Life leaders, is insane. And these aren't just children cyberbullying other children. These are like adults, people who have like jobs and like could go to jail, cyberbullying students. And I do think it's not, you know, pro-life young people aren't immune to that. You know, that they still, it hurts them if someone calling them a racist, or that they don't care about women who've survived sexual assault because they're against abortion, or that they're ableist because they're against abortion, or they're a transphobe because they associate with me because I'm apparently the biggest transphobe out there. And it's like, and I laugh, like, these things don't bother me because you're exactly right. Like, my identity is not based on what somebody I have never met. You have other things
going on. You're a mom, you're a wife. Like, these are very important roles in our lives that help give us stability, and these kids haven't had the chance to develop it. And that's why I think it's really important. I think, like, the other thing that's really important is preparing our kids, our families from the start, right? Like raising families, raising kids who can be strong in character. We all go through that thing where we're finding ourselves and we're not sure. But, one thing I would always tell my kids is, particularly in this age of like gender identity and sexual identity, I always told my kids.
You showed them the gender unicorn, right? And you had them pick it all out.
I don't have the right charts. But I would tell them, you don't have to go making up an identity. You already are somebody. You're a Davis. You are a follower of Christ. You are an American. You already have your identity. You don't need to go making up your identity. Then there are too many people out there, a lot of your friends who are trying to become something, and they haven't had anybody to tell them that they already are something. You already are.
This is why you're Tina Whittington's favorite podcaster, because I'm like listening to you. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Tina Whittington's.
Well, I'll tell you a story about my son, who's 19 now. He goes to school in Chicago, and when he was 9 or 10, I sat him down and I showed him some pictures of aborted babies. I showed him some pictures of abortions, and he was horrified, rightly so. He was horrified, and my husband said, why would you do that? That's terrible. Like, he's traumatized. I'm like, no. I did it because I wanted him to know that as a man, that there are going to be people in your life who are going to ask you to have an opinion about this. This is like an absolute in American life. Somebody's going to ask you one day to have an opinion about it. And I'm never going to dictate your opinions to you. You can decide for yourself how you want to think. But if you're going to talk about the issue of abortion, you need to know what it is. I don't want you thinking about like it's just a word that starts with the letter A. It is an action. It has consequences, and here are the consequences. And if you are horrified by it, that is the right reaction. You still may go on to believe that abortion's right, but don't ever go into a conversation and you don't really know what you're talking about.
No.
I make sure my kids really know what we're talking about. We're not. There's no like prettying it up. If you're gonna have an opinion on what to my mind is the most important issue in life, then you darn well better know what you're talking about.
I know. I've thought about that for a marketing campaign, and I don't know a succinct way to say it, but if every person looked at abortion for what every child when they first find out it is, there would be no abortion, because every child. When I had the conversation with my 10-year-old, I mean, they're absolutely
like, what?
horrified.
How can you do this?
I know it's gotten so bad though, because Gunnar then blames everything on Democrats. Like, we were on like this weird road, and the construction was weird. And Gunnar was like, "Let me guess, a Democrat or
nice.
A liberal did that." And I'm like, "Well, okay." I was like, "You can be a liberal and be a good person."
But probably a liberal did do that. Yeah.
But so now it's kind of the opposite way. So Gunnar's not allowed to debate politics until he's watched every video that PragerU's ever put out. I told him. I said, that's the baseline. You have to watch every PragerU little short video, and then you can debate me and anybody else you want, because right now you're going to just get me like bitch slapped by somebody. I don't know what it is.
One time my son and I were having a debate about abortion as he was getting older and becoming a teenager, and he said, well, what about rape? What about, and so we were having a little debate. My daughter, who's 5 years younger than him, at that time I had not really gone into it with her, and so she was like, well, what's an abortion? And so I said, well, gosh, try explaining abortion out loud, especially to a kid who might not know how everything in the woman's body works. So I was like, well, an abortion is when a woman decides she doesn't want her baby for whatever reason. She can't have the baby, and she goes into the doctor, and the doctor basically reaches inside her and snips the baby out and pulls the baby. And then she's like, and then the baby dies? Like, yeah, the baby dies. That's the point. And her response, her little like 8 or 9 year old ear's response was, how can that be legal? Why isn't that against the law? You know, like a normal response is
every child. I can't
she
think
could
of
not
I can't ever think of any child learning this information and being like, no, but it's her body.
Yeah. because they're still so close to it.
Yeah.
She's still so close at that. She's still so close to being that little being, that little fetus. So she for sure feels it. Like the idea that she could maybe not be here.
I'm actually thinking this would be a really great video, but then I'm thinking everyone will hate it because there's actually people get very upset though to find out you've told your child.
All the time. People tell me what a terrible parent I am.
I released a video of me telling Gunnar, and I had some of my abortion tools, and Gunnar had already kind of known, but we had some camera folks at my house, and so we sat down one day and filmed it, and people were like, "This is child abuse. You're committing child abuse." I'm like, "Why?"
Abortion's not child abuse.
I would think let's talk about what child abuse really is.
Yeah.
That's the topic that I just told my son.
Snap the neck of a baby in the womb. That's fine, but my body, my choice. But you tell. No, I mean, yeah, it is disturbing. It is disturbing, but there's a lot of disturbing things that we have to be honest with our kids about. You know what? My husband and I have to sit down and have the conversation, mainly with my son, about what you do when the police pull you over. That's a disturbing conversation because we've both had our own traumatizing experiences with police and racism, and it's a real thing, and we've lived in communities where it's a problem. I don't want to sit down and talk to my son about that because I don't want him to think of all police officers as racist, or I don't want him to feel fear when he's dealing with law enforcement. They're there to protect him as an American citizen. It's a tough conversation to have. That is half the problem in this country is too many of y'all are not having the tough conversations with your kids because you're cowards and you're raising kids that don't know enough about life. And then that's how we get idiots who come out and tell us that women have penises. That's it. I mean, you just answered the crux of my question for you today. What do we do when we're talking to conservatives and trying to bring more conservatives into the broader pro-life movement as donors, as activists, as more committed voters? And it's just stop being cowards. Yeah. Because it's good in the sense of we've moved the culture so far where now being anti-abortion is socially acceptable. People will say it, like a more ago, people were saying it, they were okay with it, but then they still kind of have these exceptions, and so we still have to keep pushing to challenge, I think, folks to stop being cowardly. So I'm so glad you stopped by for this chat today. Yeah, me too. Oh, we need to do this more because this was a lot of fun. We need to talk about, we need to have you come back on, talk specifically about race and abortion, because absolutely. It is unbelievable. The history with Margaret Sanger. Of course. And you can't even, by the way, I don't know, I used to go to NYU. They had a Margaret Sanger Center, and they had all of her writings. They were public. It's all gone now. You can't find any of her stuff. They've erased her. I mean, it apparently still exists, probably in some building that I can't get to on NYU's campus. Yeah. But all of this stuff is now hidden behind firewalls. But we know there's institutional I know institutional racism exists because I know we still fund Planned Parenthood. I have anybody who's listened to my podcast, Tina Whittington. It's heard me talk. I have an episode on systemic racism, which a lot of conservatives did not like because they thought I was taking on the language of the left. But I was saying, no, there is systemic racism. It's just not in the same places people try to tell us it is. One place is in the abortion industry. If you want to talk about a system that was set up for a specific purpose to thwart the life and success of minorities, boom, 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 there you go. It's right there. It was literally set up for that reason. It's systemic racism. And now we're so far from that a lot of people go, well, the mission, that's what it was originally, but we're not that anymore. But if you try to say that about America to some people, right, they'll be like, no. Those Nazis, they may have killed 6 million Jews in concentration camps, but all the Nazis I know today, they're really good people. They just want safe neighborhoods. Yeah, that sounds just good family people. Equally as awful. So, all right, there's a lot to be said. We need to do a whole nother episode on that. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. You all need to make sure you subscribe and listen to Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis. It is an excellent podcast. I don't even listen to that many podcasts, but Tina sold me a couple months ago that I have to subscribe and listen to Kira's podcast. So I've got to make time. It's like you and Joe Rogan, the podcast. So there you go. That's where I'm getting my information from. So okay, I don't know what that says about you, but
There's some good conversations. I like to have different conversations with different folks. So the Leah Remy one was really fascinating. I was listening to that one the other day.
Yeah.
That was great. So, okay, enough talking. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Explicitly Pro-Life today. I hope this conversation was helpful for you as we go forward in our conversations to woo more conservatives into the pro-life movement, because we need everyone to join us to fight against the violence of abortion, because we all know Roe is going to be reversed, and we're going to have a 50-state battle here pretty soon. Bye.